You ever think you've built yourself a safe place, only to find out somebody else has already moved in on it? That's what it felt like pulling up to my lake mansion that morning. Coffee still warm in the cup holder, ready to enjoy a quiet weekend. Except instead of peace, I found cars lined up like a parade down the driveway. Catering trucks, valet signs, balloons swaying in the breeze. And through the wide glass windows, strangers I'd never seen in my life were stomping through my great room like they'd bought tickets for the privilege. This place wasn't just a house. It was supposed to be my clean slate. I'd sunk everything into restoring the mansion, brick by brick, roof tile by roof tile, because I thought if I could fix the structure, maybe I could fix what was broken in me. Every permit signed, every inspection double-checked. Even pulled short-term rental licenses just to cover every angle. That way nobody could twist my intentions. Nobody could claim a right to my sanctuary. Paperwork was my armor, and I wore it proudly. So seeing 24 strangers laughing under chandeliers I'd just rewired, stomping muddy shoes across the polished hardwood I'd refinished myself, it was like being robbed in broad daylight. And in the middle of it all, I saw her. Karen, HOA president, grinning like a queen at a coronation, glass of champagne in hand. She waved a folded document at me, bold as brass, like it was her shield. My signature at the bottom, scrawled neat and formal. A rental contract, one I'd never laid eyes on in my life. She'd told them this was her doing. Her gift to the neighborhood. A community gathering hosted at my expense. Nearly 100 people invited, RSVPs stacked like wedding cards. The lie was too big to be casual. This wasn't some neighborly misunderstanding. This was Karen staking her claim, trying to fold my sanctuary into her HOA empire. The first emotion was shock. The second was ice-cold focus. I've been in business long enough to know a forged document when I see one. And this one reeked of it. The ink wasn't mine, the scrawl was too clean, and the dates didn't line up. She thought she could bluff her way through, thought the spectacle of 100 guests would overwhelm me into submission. I didn't shout. Didn't throw anyone out. I just stepped inside, calm as stone, and closed the front doors behind me. Locked them. Every guest who noticed gave me a sideways glance, champagne still in hand, laughter starting to fade. I looked Karen dead in the eye across the crowded room and told her one word. Trespassing. That landed heavy, like a gavel. While her smile faltered, I got to work. Took the contract from the caterer's hands, scanned the metadata right there on my phone. Dates embedded in the file. Creation stamps that didn't match Karen's story. Proof even before I sent it to my lawyer. My niece Trish, sharp as a razor in her paralegal work, confirmed it within the hour. The contract wasn't drafted yesterday, like Karen claimed. It had been created weeks earlier, long before she'd even sent her request. A forgery dressed up as neighborly goodwill. And then came the emails. HOA board blasting threats, warning of fines, $2,000 a day, for backing out of a pre-approved event. Karen's words dripping with fake cheer. Don't be selfish. The community deserves this. As if my walls, my floors, my memories were a public park she could reserve on a whim. What she didn't count on was my own documentation. Doorbell cameras capturing every delivery, every guest, every absence of her ever asking permission. I had footage that proved she'd never once stood on my porch, never once gotten a yes from me. Her whole case, her whole charade, built on nothing but lies. Then came the twist. A neighbor, Jerry, old lineman, crusty, allergic to HOA politics, forwarded me an email chain she'd sent the board. Don't worry, I've got the keys. My stomach dropped, not because it was true, but because it showed intent. Malice. She wanted them to believe she had control over my property. That she could open my doors any time she wished. That's when grief and disbelief burned off like fog, leaving only steel. This wasn't about a party anymore. This was about someone trying to take what wasn't theirs and daring me to stop them. Karen had no clue who she was messing with. I built a binder that night. Every email, every forged timestamp, every clip from my cameras. Timelines matched to metadata, receipts lined up with phone logs. It wasn't rage anymore, it was strategy. Years of business, of contracts, of reading people's tells. It all clicked back into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war, and war I knew how to fight by the time Monday morning rolled around. The HOA circus had already spun into high gear. Karen was doubling down, sending out official-looking notices to the entire neighborhood, painting me as the selfish outsider who refused to share my space. Her words dripped with that practiced authority she wielded at every board meeting. I had agreed, she insisted. I had signed. The event was for the good of the community, but lies have weight, and Karens were starting to buckle under their own load. I wasn't just some naive homeowner blindsided by paperwork. I was prepared. Every inspection, every permit, every notarized document I'd gathered while restoring the mansion was already filed, time-stamped, bulletproof. And now I had a binder thick as a law book, a trail of evidence that showed the forgery for what it was. Still, I knew evidence meant nothing without pressure. So I began with the guests. I drafted a notice, formal, direct, that anyone who remained on my property without my permission was trespassing, that each RSVP had been tied to a forged contract, and that legally they were liable for damages. Then I had Marcus, an old army buddy turned private investigator, help me deliver it. Door to door, inbox to inbox. The effect was immediate. Fear rippled through the crowd that had once been so eager to toast under my roof. Caterers backed out first, then vendors. A few families who'd RSVP'd quietly sent apologies, but others clung to Karen's words, believing her authority protected them. That was fine. I didn't need them all to leave. I just needed enough to fracture her illusion of control. Karen, though, wasn't rattled, at least not in public. At the emergency HOA meeting she called that week, she strutted in like a general rallying troops. Papers fanned out on the table, her voice syrupy but sharp. She accused me of fabricating evidence, of trying to undermine community spirit. She waved that forged contract again, bold as brass, as though repetition would make it real. What she didn't expect was my counterstrike. I walked in with Marcus at my side, laid my binder down in front of the board, and opened it to the first page. Metadata reports, email headers, doorbell footage. One by one, I laid out the sequence: Karen's request email, my refusal, the forged contract dated weeks before she ever wrote to me. Trish had even highlighted the embedded file properties, breaking down the digital fingerprint in plain English. The board members shifted uneasily. A couple avoided her eyes entirely. That's when I knew the tide was turning. But Karen? She doubled down again, insisting it was all a technical glitch, that the spirit of my agreement mattered more than the fine print. The desperation in her voice was masked under that same plastic smile, but the cracks were showing. I stayed calm. Calm is what rattles people like Karen the most. No shouting, no threats. Just facts lined up like dominoes falling in sequence. And when the final piece landed, Jerry's forwarded email, the one where Karen bragged about having my keys, the room went silent. You could feel the shift, the air sucked right out of the HOA's sails. Still, the board wasn't about to step in and admit fault. Not yet. They mumbled about reviewing the evidence, about giving Karen the benefit of the doubt. That was fine with me. I wasn't expecting justice from them anyway. My aim had always been bigger. That night, I sat in the study, the lake shimmering black outside the window, binder open under lamplight. I thought about Eleanor, about the house we'd once dreamed of retiring in together, about how peace had been ripped out from under me again. And I felt that old courtroom fire rise. This wasn't just about one forged contract or one hijacked party. It was about drawing a line no one could cross again. So I drafted my next move, a civil suit. 100 guests had RSVP'd under a forged agreement. That was 100 counts of trespassing, 100 counts of damages, 100 opportunities to push back hard enough to shatter Karen's empire. Each guest, whether they knew it or not, had been pulled into her scheme. And if I filed against them directly, the ripple would reach her faster than any HOA meeting ever could. Marcus raised an eyebrow when I told him. "You're going nuclear," he said. He wasn't wrong, but some wars aren't won with half measures. Some require shock and awe, and so I prepared the filings. Names, dates, liabilities. 100 suits, each carrying damages of $100,000. Stacked together, it wasn't just a warning. It was a hammer. Karen wanted to play queen of the neighborhood. She wanted to weaponize my property. Well, I had just armed myself with the one thing she couldn't fake, forge, or talk her way out of: the law. The lawsuits landed like thunderclaps. One by one, process servers knocked on doors across the neighborhood, handing over envelopes thicker than most phone bills. Neighbors who had laughed under my chandeliers just days earlier were suddenly pale, clutching papers that spelled out damages of $100,000 each. Some cursed under their breath. Some slammed doors. A few even called me directly, voices trembling, asking how this could be happening. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. My answer was always the same. Talk to Karen. She signed you up for this. And slowly, the cracks spread. The so-called community event Karen had bragged about became a liability bomb detonating in her own backyard. Vendors she'd sweet-talked into service started sending demands for payment, no longer trusting her arrangements. Guests turned angry, calling HOA board members at all hours, demanding explanations. The board meetings, once her stage for power plays, turned hostile. She wasn't the general anymore, she was the scapegoat, but Karen didn't back down. Not at first. She strutted into the next HOA session in a red blazer like it was a shield, papers in hand, declaring me a bully, a man exploiting legal loopholes to crush community spirit. She waved her forged contract again, voice trembling with conviction. But this time, the board didn't rally. They asked questions, hard ones, about file metadata, about Jerry's forwarded email, about the mounting bills hitting their desks, and when Karen couldn't answer, her plastic smile faltered. That's when I dropped the next card. My lawyer filed a separate suit, this one aimed squarely at her. Forgery, fraud, intentional infliction of damages. I made sure copies of the evidence, Trish's breakdowns, doorbell footage, metadata prints, were attached for all to see. The sheriff's office got involved after that. Karen hadn't expected the county to care, but fraud tied to digital forgery carries weight. They showed up at her door, asked to see her devices, her files. Neighbors whispered as deputies carried out boxes of records. For the first time since this circus began, Karen wasn't smiling. The fallout came fast. The lawsuits against the guests? Most were quietly settled, their insurance companies scrambling to distance them from Karen's scheme. A handful made noise, but once they saw the forged contract, they backed down. By the time the dust settled, damages added up to more than $10 million on paper. Not all of it collectible, of course, but enough leverage to sink an HOA that thrived on petty fines and intimidation. The board fractured. Half resigned outright, tired of the circus. The other half scrambled to distance themselves from Karen, claiming they'd been misled. By the time the county clerk posted notice of the lawsuits, the HOA was already bleeding money. Legal fees, settlements. Karen's forged empire collapsed in slow motion, each filing another crack in the foundation. As for Karen, she tried to claw back with counterclaims, but they fell apart under scrutiny. Every lie she'd told was pinned to hard evidence. The forged contract, the email boasting she had my keys, the threats of fines she had no legal authority to enforce. Piece by piece, her credibility was shredded until there was nothing left but a woman exposed for what she really was. A bully who thought paperwork and a smile could cover up a theft. The last time I saw her, she was leaving the courthouse, head down, papers clutched to her chest. No champagne glass, no audience, just silence. And me, I went back to the mansion by the lake, back to the quiet I'd been chasing since Eleanor passed. The suits, the chaos, the fights, they weren't about revenge. They were about reclaiming what was mine, about proving that no one, not even a self-appointed queen with an HOA title, could rewrite my life with forged signatures and empty threats. The house was empty again, just the way I wanted it. Sunlight spilled across the polished floors, the lake shimmering beyond the windows. I sat in the great room, binder closed at last, and let the quiet wash over me. Peace, earned, and a warning. Written in ink Karen could never forge. Cross my threshold again, and the law will meet you at the door.